Well, hello, everybody. I'm excited that you're here and we're back together again. And we're continuing on in our journey and exploring the human aspects of change management and team optimization. As you know, I'm incredibly passionate about the nature of work and team dynamics and the role of leadership, how each of us are in our particular roles and responsibilities have a very important leadership capacity that we bring to the organization, whether we are leaders by position in the organization chart, or we are leaders by project or program leadership, or even just leaders in the work that we're doing and the way that we influence the culture around us. And so today we're continuing on in our exploration of the human aspects of change management. Of course, some of you are joining from the perspective of business processes and business process optimization. And one of the things that's beautiful, I think, about the topic of change and change management is that it truly transcends any one particular topic. So for us, our exploration is in that space of continuous improvement, how to create organizations that are focused on and passionate about continuous improvement as well. And so my name's Diana Willis. I'm the CEO and founder of the Pendolino Group. And as you may know, some of you are joining us from the perspective of having worked together around Nintex ProMap implementations and onboarding. Others I know are joining from the standpoint of work that we've done in the area of change management, process optimization, or various HR programs that we've worked together on as well. And then some of you are new to the Pendolino Group and exploring what these series and sessions are all about. So as you know, we do these sessions generally once every week. We have a session and we group them together into various topics. And these are all focused around certain certification levels that we have. So we do have a change management professional certification. If you are following along and participating in this series, then you will be eligible for that certification. We just have a quick communication about it. We'll make sure that we get that taken care of. Our first 5 sessions, as you can see here, what we've already covered, we've really been looking at change and change management from a human perspective and realizing that the human aspect is something that is often maybe not necessarily overlooked, because I think we all know that it's there, but it is something that can be elusive and often is avoided, maybe not, certainly not intentionally, but it's a little bit, to use a technical HR term, it's a little bit squishy, right? So on the human side, what we're focused on is how to address the human side systematically. And so we've been looking at different components of managing the human element of change. We covered, starting at the top, how to involve every layer in the organization, some of the principles of change and change management and the cycles of change and the stages of change, building a formal case for change and the power of doing that, the criticality of doing that and the power of building that formal case and communicating it, and also ways to create ownership. And so in each one of our sessions, we go through tips and tricks, and I want you to take away some good nuggets that you can start to put into action for your organization. Now, we're turning the corner, and we're going into communicating the message. That's where we're going to do a deep dive today. How to communicate the message, the things to be looking for, pitfalls to watch out for, how we make sure that we're effective in communicating the message. We will, in our next sessions, we'll dig into assessing the cultural landscape, where are things, what's relevant in the culture that you've got today, and ultimately having a vision and understanding the culture you're out to create, addressing that culture explicitly, and then of course dealing with the unexpected. How do we plan for unexpected things, right? And plan for things that we do expect. So laying out what are those potential roadblocks or barriers for us as well, as we're looking at our ultimate vision and finally speaking to the individual. So let's dive in around communicating the message. As you know, our sessions are designed and intended to be short segments. So we're looking at 20 to 30 minutes here. All right, we're going to move fast through content, and I want to make sure that you get everything that you're looking for here as well. If there are any questions that you have, feel free to drop them into the chat section. If I don't have a chance to get to them, then I will definitely reach back out to you again afterwards and make sure that you get your questions answered. If there are any tools or tips or templates, anything like that that I reference that you're interested in getting copies of, just let me know, and we make sure that we'll get that over to you as well. All right. So let's dive into communicating the message. So the platform here and the context here is that this idea that change leaders often make the mistake of believing others understand the issue. So we're going to dive into this a little bit more about what does that mean? What's the pitfall there? And why does that occur? And then how do we manage for that? We will also talk more fully now today about reinforcing core messages and how we go about doing that, and some of the tools that are important for us to leverage to help us be able to communicate and reinforce those key messages. And also this concept of communication flowing in from the bottom and out from the top. It's a little bit of a reverse engineering, if you would agree. I think typically we think about communication coming from the top and cascading down to the bottom. Well, this is we're flipping that on its head, and it's an important, really important aspect of how we want to be thinking about communication for effective change and change management. And then also targeting the right people with the right information at the right time. So let's dive in deeper here. Okay, so first of all, I want to bring us back to the change models that we explored in an earlier session and put our context on here, because everything that we do in the world of communication, we need to remember that we are leading people through a curve of change, a cycle of change. Now, some of you may already be familiar with the Kubler-Ross change management, which is this blue curve here that we see, or individuals through denial, guilt, anger, bargaining. If I can outlast this particular change or new product or new system or new process, if I can outlast it, then things will be fine, right? Some of you may have heard that before. Heck, some of us may have even played that game before, right? So if I can outlast it, maybe it doesn't apply to me. It creates confusion for me. I'm just going to try to ignore it. This is kind of an extreme that I'm describing here, but let's be honest, that does exist to one degree or another. And as we can move people through that curve, we do start to get into this really interesting and much more powerful zone of being open and accepting and curious, and ultimately into engagement. Okay, so this is kind of what we will call a loosely structured change process. This is change left to its own device. Now, where we're focused is how do we move through this change curve much faster? So this is a well-managed change process. This was introduced to us by Rogers, and it's this concept of diffusion of innovation. And you'll notice that what we're actually doing is that we're lessening this valley here. Right? And so we're able to actually move people from current state, from a state of steadiness and emotional well-being, if you will, or well-being, emotional state of homeostasis, if you will. So we're moving people quickly from this stage, introducing change and swiftly moving them across into this space of being encouraged and involved and curious and accepting. And so they now are quickly moving here. The way that we get there, the primary channel, if you will, or mechanism for doing that is communication. No other path is going to do that. So that emphasizes why it's important for us to understand the mechanics of communication and the methodologies that we can use to effectively move individuals and hence the entire organization quickly through this curve and minimize the disruption that occurs when we leave change to a very loosely structured approach. Okay, so feel free, grab a screenshot of this one so you can keep it handy for reference as you're looking at your organization. You're really thinking about how effectively are we moving the organization through this particular aspect, this particular change, this new program, this new methodology. And this will be something that we come back to when we assess the organization culture, the organization readiness in some of our future sessions as well. All right, so in that context, I love this quote. Absolutely love this quote. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And this is such a powerful platform to be operating from as we get deeper into the methodology for communication and the critical aspects of a communication program. As we get deeper into that, let's keep this quote in mind. Okay, so now let's put some context around this and how communication flows and the structure, meta level, if you will, that it's important for us to keep in mind. So you'll recall that as we're looking at change and context, we start out by setting our vision at the meta level. We establish our vision and we reinforce. Our goal is to reinforce that message. Okay, so we've established this. Now, in order to actually achieve that vision, it does require that we are consistently communicating what that vision is, that we are consistently anchoring back to it, that we, and by we, I mean all of us in the organization, the leaders to begin with, the early adopters, the key influencers, we want this vision to continue to be communicated. So we keep anchoring back to this, okay? And in that, what's important is that through our leadership, through our programs, that we are actually reinforcing this concept that communications are going to flow in from the bottom of the organization. We actually start there because communications are going to bubble up. We need to be pulsing and listening to what are the communications that are coming to us. In other words, how far apart are we from our current state? How far apart are we to our vision? That's the bottoms up communication that's happening, right? And in understanding that bottoms up communication, that helps to inform the communication that comes out from the top. All right, it's a very important distinction here. Traditional communication models will have it that communication always, it comes from the top, that it flows in from the top, into the organization from the top. In fact, it's flowing into the organization from the bottom. And the messages coming out from the top are in response to that and are leading the conversation, okay? So we're just going to let that sit with you and kind of percolate a little bit, because it is an important distinction. And as you start to think about your organization, how you've communicated traditionally in the past, how has that worked for you? There have likely been gaps. There have likely been spots where, as you reflect back, you think, wow, we really could have communicated that much more effectively, much more diligently, much more practically. All right, so the reason for that gap is that you didn't necessarily take this approach and this concept that communications flow in from the bottom and out from the top. So I'm going to repeat that a little bit more as we get deeper into this session, but let's let that sit for a moment. The next component, as we work our way around this, is that to effectively communicate, it includes not only the words that we're using, the more traditional communications, right, and our words and our the messages that we deliver from verbally, but it also includes the way that we align all of our programs, all of our processes, the things that we do, our behaviors, all of that communicates, right? I mean, I think everyone here in the room knows that. We've all probably taken traditional communication courses as well, and we know that our behaviors speak as loud or louder than our words. The way that we show up really tells people what's important to us. And so from that standpoint, that is very true in the organization. And so what we're looking at here is to actually design a consistent message through the programs that we have. Okay, so in our example here, this illustration, we talk about things like compensation and benefits programs and total rewards and learning and development programs and recognition programs and all of those things. You have to create alignment, because those programs are all things that speak to or communicate what's really important for the organization. Okay, so systematically, as you're building out your change and change management, systematically, you should be looking at all of the aspects of your organization, and are those aspects aligned to the vision, to the change that we're creating, especially if you're on this journey of continuous improvement, creating a culture of continuous improvement, which I think is why most of you are in this conversation right now. All right, so the next piece is, again, related to soliciting the input and the feedback, right? Because what did we just say? Technically, this is where communication starts. The input, the feedback, what's actually happening? How are people responding? What are they actually doing? This is all the communication. This is where it starts for us, all right? So from that standpoint, let's take a look at some of the aspects of change and where some of the pitfalls of communication take place, all right? As a communication leader, as a change management professional and a change management leader, one of the things that you need to keep an eye out for, and please, take this, take this to heart, is that the biggest pitfall of communication is that too often we make the mistake of believing that others understand the issues, feel the need for change, and see the new direction as clearly as we do. Remember, we are one of the early adopters by definition. We are convinced of the opportunity that exists. We've gone through the change curve already. In most aspects, we're all the way on the other side of the curve as is. And it is very, very easy to make the mistake of believing that others are in the same place that we are. So this is where your patience and your artful communication and your artful approach to the formal communication channels, it will take a look at in more detail, as well as those informal channels, the way that you influence the design of those informal channels. Remember our total rewards programs, for example, our learning and development programs, for example, our business processes. So the way that you artfully influence those to align to the bigger change. That's where your expertise and one of your great value contributions comes from. So watch for yourself those times when you may be communicating and actually may slip into, all of us do this, may slip into that false belief, if you will, that others are there with us. They get it, right? They're saying they're right there. They're shaking their head. But watch the behaviors. And so watch how their behaviors come around. And that's what you should continue to focus on to help in bringing people through the curve. Watch their behaviors and their alignment and continue to coach them, okay? Because the truth is that you and your leadership and your early adopters, you have all been steeped in the discussion substantially longer than others have. So it's very easy to develop that false sense of believing that others or everyone else is on board, right? You've been in this conversation for quite some time and you've made the move. In fact, it may even seem like it's a boring topic to you. All right, we're done, we're over it, we've moved on, we're on to the next thing. All right, yeah, of course we've got a continuous improvement environment. We've been talking about this and we've put these pieces in place. And so of course everyone's on board and we're off to the next thing. And now we're creating change in that environment, right? So it is easy to fall into that false sense of hope. Keep an eye out for this one and stay the course, all right? Because often what it means is that what you're needing to do is truly bring others up, as I call it, up to your level of awareness and commitment, right? And you'll know as you're getting there because others will start stepping in and starting to take on even more ownership and offering to take on pieces for you and asking to be on your team and bringing the same level of excitement and enthusiasm that you're bringing. So you will start seeing it. It will be in those kinds of behaviors. That's when you know that you're starting to get people on board. right? And as we've talked about in terms of the change, the flow of early adopters and getting that critical mass, as we've talked about that curve in our earlier session, remember that as you get more people on board, it will become easier and easier to believe that everyone understands the issues. Everyone has that same sense of excitement and urgency and desire to create, and that everyone is there. But remember, you will still have some individuals who will be a little bit slower to change, a little slower to come along. So allow those who have taken on your same level of awareness and commitment, allow them to carry the organization forward, to keep moving forward with this change now. And you are able to nurture and bring along those in the curve, it's called a laggard, right? You're able to bring along those individuals and get everyone on board, right? And truly shift the entire organization, shift the entire culture, okay? So keep an eye out for this one as in terms of pitfalls, all right? And again, feel free to grab a screenshot of it. We'll have this available for everybody to take a look at as well on one of our channels here in the future as well, okay? Now, the next piece is keeping in mind and reinforcing this idea that change is a personal thing. Okay, so as we dug into this a little bit earlier, a different session, remember that what we're looking at is this concept of continuous improvement and change from a very personal standpoint. So individually, everyone will go through these phases: denial, resistance, experimentation, commitment. The speed with which they go through them is dramatically different, one person to the next. Some individuals are very fast. You know, they see something, they see an opportunity, boom, they've made the move. They've quickly moved through in their mind any sense of denial, any sense of resistance. They've shifted on through. They're curious, they experiment with it, and off to the races they go, so to speak, right? Others, what might on the surface seem like a very simple change, others are going to take their time going through this, but you can trust that every individual will go through this. And so if I reflect back on the slide we were just looking at, so reflect back on that for a moment as we were talking about the pitfall. And this primary pitfall of believing that everyone is as committed as we are. Where that comes from is by forgetting that every person needs to go through this sequence. And as we sit in this space of commitment and moving forward, it's often easy to forget where are other individuals. And so in an upcoming session, we're going to drill into each one of these areas and identify the types of behaviors that you can be looking for to help assess where are individuals, and hence collectively, where is the organization on this curve. And all the way down to the individual, you will be able to identify what stage they're in and what strategies you can use, what approaches you can use to help bring people quickly through this cycle and bring them into commitment. So this is where that blind spot, that pitfall resides. When we're in commitment, we've already gone through these phases. Others are at their pace. We want to manage that, right? So from that standpoint, again, keeping this in mind, this will be our individual assessment framework as we look into those into that aspect in an upcoming session. Okay, so now let's just take one more look here at what good change programs and the communication components, what that looks like. All right, because that's our conversation today, is around communication. How do we ensure that we have good, solid, consistent communication? So the hallmarks of excellent change programs, okay, and the communication component of an excellent change program. One of the hallmarks is that the core messages are reinforced regularly and in a timely way. And so here what we're saying is reinforcing the core messages through regular and timely advice. So we're advising the organization, we're advising individuals. Notice the coaching component here. So we're coaching individuals through the change. And we're doing that by creating an alignment to our vision, right? So this regular, timely advice has to be inspirational. Why are we doing this? What is the benefit? Why this change? Why this change now? Remember in our case study a few sessions ago, we spoke about a very, very powerful shift that took place, the manufacturing organization, right? Over 100-year-old organization, very, very strong familial culture, facing organization market shifts that were putting the entire organization at risk, at financial risk, at the potential of being shut down. And they had to take some dramatic action. And they created such an inspirational, powerful message, powerful why, when they introduced the changes that had to take place, which represented the largest layoff that that organization had ever experienced. They actually had everyone in that organization 100% bought in and understanding and supportive and encouraging and being supportive for those people whose positions were impacted, being supportive for those who were remaining in the organization, being bought in so powerfully because they linked their message to the core why, the history of the organization, what that organization stood for. That's the kind of inspiration that you're going after here. So that when you're delivering your core message, these regular, timely mechanisms, that it's inspirational, people are bought in, it's practical, it's very down to earth, it's very clear, it's crisp, it's easy to pick up, easy to understand, and it's practicable. In other words, it is action oriented. So these are the key hallmarks that you want to be looking for in your communication, these three components. Now, the next thing is thinking about this concept of communications flowing in from the bottom. If you can see my hand, I'm kind of scooping up from the bottom, okay? And so in from the bottom and then out from the top, okay? So scooping out from the top. So communications flow in from the bottom and out from the top. This is the feedback mechanism, right? We want to be listening because all of our communications, we want to make sure that they're targeted to provide the right information at the right time. And the only way that you're truly going to be able to do that is to be listening to what's going on in the organization. And by listening, again, I'm not only speaking about the words, but I'm also speaking about listening to the behaviors, watching the behaviors that are happening, okay? So in response to that communication that's flowing in from the bottom, we want to target our communication to provide the right information at the right time, continuing to move the business forward, move the team forward, and continually soliciting that feedback. It's the most important component of the communication channel, the communication cycle, right? So we're soliciting that feedback. So what that means, and you want to get comfortable with this, as comfortable as you are going to get with the pitfall of believing everyone's on board, right? So you want to get comfortable with this piece as well. It often requires that over-communication through multiple and redundant channels is necessary. It's as simple as that, right? Be willing and welcome the opportunity to over-communicate. It will absolutely pay off in spades down the road for you, okay? So there are a couple of tools I just want to bring your attention to here real quick. We're getting close to our wrap-up period. So a few critical tools that I have found to be extremely helpful. And I have templates for these. If you'd like copies of them, please just reach out to me. I'll get copies of these templates, these mechanisms for you. Some of the critical tools include having a powerful structure and also having project management skills. So what I'm talking about here is that done well, you are managing a communication project and the nature of that content shifts based upon what? The communication that's flowing in from the bottom, right? Based on what we're hearing from the organization, based on what we're observing in the behavior, that communication flowing in. So we can really think about communicating effectively being very much like a project. We have our goals around communication. We know what success is going to look like, which is 100% adoption. by the organization. And we have feedback mechanisms that we can track. How are we doing? Are we on track? Where do we need to put a little more emphasis? Where do we need to beef up the message a little bit more? Where are we getting early adoption that we can leverage? Okay, so all of those aspects. So your communication strategy and a tactical plan for communicating. Fundamentally, what you need to be mapping out or outlining on this. And again, I've got some tools and templates for you to work with to give you a good foundation. So first, who's your audience, right? What is your key message for that audience? And by audience, it could be employees, it could be other project managers, it could be new hires, it could be senior leadership, it could be vendors. Okay, so what's your audience? What is the key topic? And these topics, of course, are going to shift over time as you get adoption, right? And as you move people through programs. What channels are you going to use? How are you going to leverage that communication? Is it going to be through emails? Is it going to be on a website? Is it going to be on town hall meetings, all hands meetings, open communication meetings, department meetings with managers? Yes, and use every communication channel that you have access to. You want to use all of them. So who, what topics, channel that you're going to get that out, when are you going to have all of this communicated, what are the timelines for communicating? These are the drum beats of communication. Recognize as you move through time that your topics will shift, that you may need to bring in a topic that you covered previously, but it didn't quite stick based on the feedback that you're getting. What messages were heard? Did your desired message get through? Are you seeing the shifts in behavior? Or do you need to repeat that message? Okay, so that is where your art of communication and communication management is going to come in. All right, so I realize we've run out of time. I want to be respectful of that for everybody. If you have any questions at all, please do put them in the comments section. I'll make sure that I loop back with everybody as well. Next week's topic is around assessing the cultural landscape. So we're going to get to dive in and kind of assess where individuals and the culture actually is at. It gives you a little bit of flavor of what we're looking at, and picking up speed and intensity as engagement actually cascades through the organization. So very, very exciting topic next week. I'm really looking forward to it. And if you've got any questions at all, please email me. I'm at info@pendolinogroup.com, Diana@pendolinogroup.com. I know a number of you have my direct number. Feel free to call any old time. And I'm looking forward to having you on board for our next session and completing over the next few weeks. We'll be completing this certification. Thanks again and have a wonderful, wonderful day.